Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
I know what you're doing, Crosshair, but you can't keep hiding. You need to talk to Hunter.
I'm not hiding. I'm training. What? No hug for me?
It depends how good your intel is.
Why? Why is there always a huge monster?
I've done things. I've made mistakes.
I have regrets too, Crosshair. All we can do is keep trying to be better. And who knows? There just might be hope for us yet.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee, we've got two brand new guests to Coffee with Kenobi, but they are not new to the world of podcasting. Before we introduce them, let me introduce my regular co-host for all episodes of Star Wars The Bad Batch, my son, Mason Zehr. Mason, welcome back, buddy.
Thank you. It's great to be back and exciting to see these new guests.
Yes, absolutely. And Mason, you passed the audition last week, so good job. I'm very excited for you.
Thank you.
No, hey, man, you could be running this show better than me, that's for sure. So it's great to do this with a father and son dynamic. But when I was planning out the show, I thought, there's another father-son podcast out there, and they are the best in the business at working as a family and a team. I'm going to bring him in individually. He is one of the co-hosts of Father.Son.Galaxy, Kerwin Yarde.
Thank you,
to
Dan.
have you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. This is my first time on Coffee with Kenobi, and you have a reputation that if you're a Star Wars fan, you know Coffee with Kenobi. So I'm so glad to be here. So thank you again.
That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that, and it's been an honor to be in so many of these media junkets and interviews with all these wonderful Star Wars people with you. And the other co-host of this evening, he is the other part of Father.Son.Galaxy, Keith Yarde. Keith, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, my friend.
Hello there.
I see what you did there. It's great to have you. So we're going to talk about the return, but before we do that, the two of you have really blazed a trail in Star Wars and fandom. It's been an absolute delight to see all of the incredible things, well-deserved things. And you both know talent is involved, but also a lot of hard work and passion. Kind of share your story with us about Father.Son.Galaxy.
Sure. Well, I've been a fan of Star Wars since I was 12. So that passion, what comes with passion is the love. I've loved this franchise for a very long time. So glad to pass it down to my son. It wasn't something that I was planning to do. But when The Force Awakens, when the start of the sequel trilogy came out, there was all this hype about the new film, Episode 7. And I was in a bookstore one day and saw that the little golden books, you remember those books? I don't know if you read those, Mason. Yeah. But they've been around since I was a kid, and they had versions of they had books of the first 6 episodes of Star Wars. And I was so excited. I grabbed it and paid for it and brought it home. And I said to Tanya, my wife, you think Keith would be interested in reading these books? And she said, well, give him the books and go ahead. And Keith was about 3 or 4 years old at the time. So we gave him the books. He loved it. And then, not too long after that, he came up to me and said, Dad, I want to watch Star Wars. And I just went, really? And then there it is. We watched all of the films, and Keith is a big Clone Wars fan. So he sat and watched all the episodes when it was on Netflix and Disney XD, I think it was. But yeah. And then The Mandalorian came along, and, we were so excited about Disney Plus and this new format. And we had the lockdown in 2020. And then, we were just thinking about, okay, well, what are some new things that we want to do as a family? What do we want to explore? What's something that's going to, be fun to do as a family? And my wife, Tanya, was the one that came up with the idea of creating a podcast. And I was reluctant. I've never done a podcast before. I'm not a podcaster. I need to go to school. I don't think I have the skills to do it, but here we are almost 3 years later.
It's fun to hear you tell that story. Keith, how would you tell the story?
Same way. Pretty much.
Same way, word for word. Do you remember the first time your dad handed you that book? You were little, but do you remember that? What are some of your early memories of Star Wars and enjoying it?
I remember watching The Force Awakens and literally falling asleep on the couch. That was funny. I especially remember there was this time where we didn't have a DVD player because we really had no use for it. So we went to Best Buy and we went to get one. For some reason, I just remember this Vizio TV just playing the randomest movie clips in the background. I'm just staring at it because I was like 4.
And your dad said that you love Clone Wars. How did you get into Clone Wars?
Because it popped up in my Netflix recommendations feed. It used to be on Netflix, and then once Disney Plus came around, Netflix dropped that like it was hot, sent it right back to Disney. Like, well, So,
Mason, I would be curious to hear what's your Star Wars story, buddy? I know it, I lived it, but I'm curious to hear how you would tell it.
Probably my earliest memory is watching A New Hope, and I remember watching when Obi-Wan Kenobi cut off.
Ponda Baba, the Aqualish, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I remember him doing that, and I was like, oh no, because I was like 5 at the time. And then my next memory is after watching Empire Strikes Back, and you recorded it. You said, "What's the next movie you want to watch?" And I said, "I think Rogue One."
So, what's the next movie you want to see of the movies you've already seen?
I think Rogue One.
Yeah, and you were like 5, and where it's like, it's a little early for Rogue One. And it's been a long part. Kerwin, you'll appreciate this. Every time I would show him a new Star Wars movie, I would turn on the recording device, just audio, and I was never going to release it, and I'm not going to release it. But I put it like in between us, and he wasn't aware of it because he's little. So I have an audio commentary of him reacting to all the movies the first time he saw him as a little kid.
Yeah,
it's really magical to listen to.
Yeah, one of the things that's pretty good. That reminded me of something that we did, Keith and I, after he's seen quite a few of the films. We, Keith had a lot of questions because Star Wars is not very easy to follow, and
yes.
We made a game out of it, and we were talking about heroes versus villains. Mm-hmm. And, we actually had a whiteboard at home, and I said, okay, well, let me see if you know the difference between a hero and a villain. And we took the whiteboard and we created a chart. We put a, line in the middle. One side, we labeled it villains, heroes. The other side was villains. And I said, okay, Keith, name all the heroes in Star Wars. And he said, Solo, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca, R2-D2. And then we got to the villains. He said Darth Vader, the Emperor. There's so many other. I don't even know. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And then when we got to Anakin Skywalker, then we said, okay, well, what do we do with that? Is Anakin a villain or is he a hero? And then the way we resolved that was, okay, well, how about we put Anakin as a hero and then Darth Vader as the villain? So, yeah, we made a game out of that. And we talked about the Roman numerals, how every film would start with a Roman numeral. So I started teaching him Roman numerals. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was educational. But yeah, we just took it to the next level and just made a game out of things. We've actually seen Star Wars: A New Hope live in concert in New Jersey. We were living in New Jersey at the time. We saw it at the Performing Arts Center. First time that we've ever seen a film live to an orchestra. So yeah, we have a lot of fun there. We've got a lot of pictures as well too. I mean, we got Halloween. I have my youngest son, Maceo, who dressed up as Lando. Keith dressed up as Finn. So we have a lot of great memories about Star Wars in our family.
That's pretty great. Yeah, I'm sure the four of us could sit and share amazing stories because there's just something special about sharing this with your son, as you know. And Mason and Keith, we hope you have as much fun with us as we do with you, because it's pretty special sharing it with some of your favorite people in the galaxy. Speaking of that, I think I said Father-Son podcast. If I did, I apologize. It's Father-Son.Galaxy. I want to get that right, because that is the show that you want to subscribe to, that you want to listen to, that you want to follow. All of the things. Speaking of all the things, it's time to jump into all the things of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Episode 5, Season 3. It is called The Return. As you know, we're going to do one word and overall thoughts before we dive into the episode more specifically. Mason, let's start with you. What is one word you would use to describe The Return and your overall thoughts on it?
So my one word this week is trust, because of all the trust that all of the Bad Batch, even Omega, has to put into trusting Crosshair, giving him his armor, back his gun, and even just letting him roam around the place and be in there with them. It takes a lot of trust with that.
Well said. Well said. I like that. Yeah, trust. You know what? I wish I would have went before you, so I could have said that. That was really good. That was really good, buddy. Keith, let's go to you next. What's one word you would use to describe The Return and overall thoughts on it?
Worms. Because that worm was like the focal point of the episode, you know?
Yes. I didn't expect you to say that, and I'm impressed. I like that. And did you see the funky spelling? WIRM?
Yeah.
Worms.
Yeah.
Why did it have to be worms?
That's what did records say? Oh, why does it have to be another monster?
Yeah, I wrote down. He says, "Why is there always a monster? A huge monster?
Yeah.
Huge monster." Yeah. That's funny. Kerwin, what would be one word for you and overall thoughts on the episode?
I would say reconciliation. I know Hunter and Crosshair have a history, and that started from the very beginning, where the two of them, they're in a position where they both want to be leaders of the group, but you can only have one leader. And Crosshair at the time, well, we don't know that yet, but he was not in a position to yield to Hunter's leadership. So instead, he decided to move on and work for the Empire. But it seems Crosshair is now coming to terms as to the mistakes that he made. He was able to voice this to Hunter, and he said, "Yeah, I admit I did make some mistakes." And not that they hugged it out at the end, but you could tell that there was a break in the ice. So I would say reconciliation. I
like the little ice metaphor you did there. Yes. My word, if I was a phrase, I wouldn't do a phrase, but I'll do a word. I think it's forgiveness. There has to be forgiveness. And, that is one of the greatest loves is to forgive. And one of the hardest things to do. The emotions throughout this episode where both Crosshair and Hunter try to create some sort of reconciliation with one another is really lovely. I almost made the word from the episode gorgeous, because I think that's a very powerful, beautiful thing. And also the architecture of this, the cinematography, the way the snow and the ice planet looks are really, really stunning. Right away when the episode starts, it was great to see Omega back at home with her family on the Marauder. And there's some really nice things going on there, I think. But Mason, what kind of stood out to you as the episode started?
At first, they didn't show Crosshair with the Bad Batch a bunch. And then as they went toward in the episode, I noticed how he was with them more often. Like in the beginning, he left before they woke up. And then after that, he was shooting at basically the shooting range with AZ. And then at the end, he was like with them, and they continued to bond.
True. Keith, what about you? What jumped out to you about the opening? What did you like about it?
I'd say the fact that, Wrecker seems to be the one who's most concerned about Crosshair. Hunter, he's really silent, but Wrecker is the one who's like, he left the ship.
Mm-hmm. True. Kerwin, what do you think?
Yeah, well, from Omega, it's probably the best sleep she's had in months. She just looked very peaceful, and she woke up, and of course she wants to, see where all of her brothers are, and she asked for Crosshair, and they told him he was outside, and first thing she did was, she went outside to see how he's doing. So that's just her. I can tell that she is family oriented, and she's always been that way from day one. So her concern about, where everybody is, what they're thinking, trying to meet their needs and see what she can do for them. But I enjoy seeing that side of Omega, but that's who she is. And then she'll always be that way.
And there's something quite endearing about when she wakes up, she's got her Tuca doll, the real one, not one made out of straw or hay. And she looks at it, she hugs it. She's got this wonderful feeling of relief that I think is quite palpable on the screen. They open up the shades, and she kind of goes down the ladder like it's a bunk bed. It kind of is, in a way, with the best view ever. And then, of course, Wrecker's like, everybody says, "Look who's awake," or something like that. But it was just a really warm, friendly thing. And it's kind of a nice exhale, because at the end of the last episode, there was that nice kind of cliffhanger where we weren't sure what was going to happen with Hunter and Crosshair. But you don't have to wait anymore, because we get to see what happens here. It's a beautiful morning it's Pabu, Pabu. That's the name of the planet.
Yeah.
And we heard this. Well, Kerwin and Keith, I think Jennifer Corbett had said on the interview we did that Pabu was designed during COVID, because that was the idyllic place they would have liked to have been during COVID. And I feel like it really stands out here. But then you contrast that with Crosshair. Mason, what did you talk about Crosshair here? And both he's doing target practice with AZ3, but then he's also has a great conversation with Omega too.
Yeah, he felt like normally he's like trying to look for places like, oh no, I have to escape. He felt relaxed and just in his vibe, like how he was doing the shooting practice. Mm-hmm. He was just like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And when Echo got there, he came along and he just felt at peace.
I agree. Kerwin, what about you?
Yeah, I think Crosshair was glad to reunite with his brothers, although he doesn't show it. I remember in the previous episode when Omega was telling Crosshair that she was trying to get a signal over to Hunter and Wrecker to let them know that they're coming. And Crosshair says, well, they may not even be alive, Omega. And, she looked at him sternly and said, of course they are. So I think he was maybe surprised that they were still there, but also glad, to be reunited with his brothers, although, one of them is not there. I think he's just trying to just feel them out. There's a lot of bad blood going on between the brothers, and, Crosshair is just looking to maybe make some space for himself, but trying to figure out exactly how does he fit back into the group. I
agree. Keith, when I watch this, one of my favorite things to watch about Crosshair is sort of the subtle way, sort of the ice around him starts to melt, and he starts to, for Crosshair to warm up, most people would think was still extremely rude, but for Crosshair, it's major growth. What are you seeing with Crosshair in this particular sequence?
I'd say with Crosshair, he's got a stick of frozen butter. You pop it in the microwave and it's hard and cold, but then after a minute or two, it warms up to its environment.
I love it.
And then melts into the plate. So,
and as you may not know, Crosshair is delicious on toast, so that makes sense.
What?
That's right. Oh, we're getting hungry here. All right.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I'm hungry.
Where's
the food?
What I love about this whole thing is Omega is able. There are a couple of times where Crosshair will kind of snicker, but he starts to smile, almost laugh a couple of times. Omega is the only person who could possibly do that. And if you would have told me during season 1 or 2 that Crosshair would be laughing or smiling, I would not have believed it. But there's a trust factor there. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
I didn't know Crosshair had feelings.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what is kind of messing with him. Is speaking of that, he's got that tick or it could be something medically induced. No one has said yet as far as the first 5 episodes. What do we make of that, and what might that show us about Crosshair? And anybody can jump in and answer this one.
All right, I'll go first. So if you've seen The Flash, like season 5, spoilers by the way, so Killer Frost loses her powers, but she doesn't actually lose them. She's just hit a mental roadblock so she can't access them. Basically, that's what I think's happening to Crosshair. So once he gets over his fears, he'll be able to straighten up and shoot right again.
That's a pretty insightful comment. It reminds me of the second Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire too. There's a long sequence of that film where Peter Parker doesn't have his powers, but it's a mental block. And I think there's a lot to go with that. Kerwin, what would you like to add to that?
No, that's a good point. It could be a mental block. I also think it is physical. I think it's, trauma. He has been through a lot. Mm-hmm. And we don't know, when he took down the Imperial officer and he was, taken into custody and put into the brig or, the facilities, the Imperial facilities, you don't know what he went through. I mean, I know we saw, maybe there was some, an operation where they were trying to maybe extract some information from him, but apparently he did not give in to whatever the torture that they were providing. They wanted him to talk. They wanted him to become one of these assassins, and Crosshair said no. But we just haven't seen exactly what he's gone through. When we pick up in the first episode, and that scene where Omega is leaving her cell, and she's got her worker uniform on, and she's walking behind Emery, and in the opposite direction you see Crosshair. I have never seen Crosshair look like this before. I mean, he just looked depressed and weak. Yeah, and he, the body language, his shoulders were hunched over. So he has been through a lot. So I think the part of the tremor that we're seeing is physical because of what he's been through as a prisoner.
Very much, and there with the torture that we're fortunately we're not able to see, there could be nerve damage.
Yeah,
right. There, that could be a problem there too. Mason, what do you think?
I think it's both can be physically and mentally, because physically, when he saves that other clone and then kills the officer, that cold must have some effect on him. So maybe his hand is still feeling that, and maybe it got like some sort of disease in that cold. And then also, he's probably just been through a lot. Like, all my friends are being killed. What do I have to do? And just, yeah.
And we also learn in this episode that he shoulders a lot of the blame. He says at the end of the episode, and we can jump around, we don't have to go in chronological order. He talks with Hunter about, I've done things. He says he's made mistakes. It could very well be psychosomatic, something emotional that is preventing him. But it's whatever the reason is, it's affecting him. And I think a lot of his confidence comes from his skills, from his abilities. He's an excellent marksman. Omega is like, that doesn't seem that hard to do, or something to that effect. I'm not paraphrasing very well, but he talks about how it requires, it's not just looking through a sight. It requires patience. And I think that's also a nice metaphor for what it's going to require for the two of them, Hunter and Crosshair, to reconnect and find some peace with one another. Once they decide they're going to go on this plan, there's a really brief mention of tech. And tech really hasn't been talked about very much in this season. We know it affects them, or at least we assume it affects them. I'm sure that it does. I'm assuming you all noticed what happened when Tech's name was brought up, and all of them did it at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. What do they do, Mace?
Yeah.
They put their head down like, we miss you, Tech.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was planned. It was just they all did it at the same time. So if there's ever any doubt that Crosshair knows.
Exactly. It was a moment of silence, it felt like to me. And you're right. And it was Echo is the one that mentioned the name Tech. And, it very few times in this season has Tech's name been mentioned. The only other time, this was brought to my attention was when Crosshair and Omega were trying to escape, and Crosshair asked, well, do you know plan so-and-so? I don't remember the number of the plan. Do you know plan so-and-so?
Yeah.
And Omega says, well, I know it because Tech taught me all the plans. Of course he did, is what Crosshair said, so.
Yeah, and you know what else?
Mhm.
I think Tech might actually be one of the few main clone characters to be to kick the bucket. So
Meaning that,
like your Rexes and your Codys and stuff, they're still alive.
Of the main characters. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There's
I mean, there was
more
like Heavy and Jesse and Tub and Fives. They're dead, but like.
Yeah, but you still think, though, that Tech may not be dead, or are you convinced now that maybe he's gone?
I'm pretty sure he's one with the spice, but
one with the spice.
A theory could be made that he's alive due to Project Necromancer.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure Hemlock went down there to go get Tech, considering he had Tech's goggles.
Good point.
And he threw them at the batch.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh, that's possible. That's possible.
Maybe that's what Project Necromancer is.
I have lots
maybe
of
it's
thoughts on
Ventress.
that.
Yeah, that's still.
I mean, it's got to be Ventress. I feel like it's more likely than not Ventress because
Well, as Yoda says, difficult to see the future is.
Right. Yeah. It. I'm sure it does have something to do with bringing back the dead, but what exactly does that mean? We don't know. But
it seems like a nice organic bridge to Episode 9. I mean, because the Emperor is so heavily invested in it, but it's hard to say. We're not big speculators, so I don't know. It's really been a fun ride to see what happens. And speaking of that, before they all agree that they're going to take this journey together, they're going to. Crosshair mentions, "I know where an Imperial terminal is." I'm pretty sure the ice planet is called Barton 4, if I'm correct. And Omega, they talk. He says, "Well, you're still a kid," and she goes, "Well, I am older than you, little brother." Yeah. I love that. And that's when Crosshair really smiles. And I thought, well, that takes a lot of guts, but Omega is fearless.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think they would all go through fire for Omega. I mean, even Crosshair now. I mean, we saw that a little bit at the end of season 1 too. Really, at the end of that sequence on Camino. Let's talk about the ice planet. Rather than just kind of going through it linearly, let's just kind of bring up things that we want to talk about that happen. Mason, why don't you start?
Let's talk about that at the exact moment that Hunter is on a certain spot of ice, how it breaks, and that is the one spot that breaks. And then in the tunnels, it seems giant, but as he walks out of the place where the beacon things were, it got smaller and smaller, and the tunnel was smaller, and even the roof basically was smaller, and that's how we got up to Crosshair.
That's true. Do you think there's anything symbolic about that? I can think of a couple of ideas. That's a kind of a hard question.
What do you think?
What do I think? I think that the smaller and smaller is that there's less and less margin for error, that they have to work together to pull themselves out of this big disaster that has come between them as far as trusting one another as soldiers, but way, way, way more importantly, as brothers. So I think it's not an accident that when Hunter needs to be pulled out of that small cave, it is Crosshair that does it, and he uses his sniper or his rifle to pull him out. I think that's symbolic because that is an extension of how Crosshair identifies himself. And so that is the bridge that connects the two of them together, which I think is pretty cool. What about, Keith, what are some things that happen on this planet that you'd like to talk about?
Crosshair and Hunter fighting, like they were literally on thin ice fighting each other. About how Hunter's saying, you're not responsible, Crosshair. I'm still mad at you for what you did. And Crosshair says, you're just upset because Omega escaped with my help. She was there because of what you did. I mean, I'm literally just picturing Crosshair waking up in that cell, and then Omega staring at him through the bars, even though he nearly died to get that message to the batch to not bring her there. I'm just imagining Crosshair being like,
It's, you know what? I like that. Kerwin, what about you? What are some things that stand out for you about this planet?
Well, I was surprised that Crosshair would return to this planet so quickly. To me, it felt like going back to the scene of the crime. And I was trying to get
Which
into
Madam Web did.
Yes, okay, Madam Web. All right.
Don't go see that movie.
Okay. I won't.
Well, every episode is going to have a Madam Web joke. So, okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get into Crosshair's head, if that's possible. So he's going back to the place where he actually took down, well, even before we get to that, he gets to a place where he's given a mission to pick up this cargo. Don't know what's in the cargo. He meets some fellow clones. Mayday tells him that, they've been looking for help or relief for a long time, and some of his men didn't even make it. They lost their lives. They finally get to Mayday.
Yeah, Mayday.
Yes, right. They finally get to the.
That's what you said.
They finally get to the crate. They open it up and they realize that it's body armor, not for them, but for stormtroopers. So they're really working to get something that belongs to someone else, right? Has nothing to do with them. And then, of course, there's danger and Mayday is in trouble and, he's, hanging on for dear life, and Crosshair brings him back to the base and he's trying to tell this Imperial officer, well, he needs help. Get him some help. The officer doesn't want to hear anything about it. And
the officer just looks at him like,
yeah, I mean, he's a clone. You're expendable, just like you're expendable. And Crosshair, took down that officer.
Crosshair said, "Lieutenant," and then put a hole through him.
Yeah, so I can just imagine, and then he gets arrested, obviously, and he gets thrown in prison. But I can just imagine, what is going through his head, like the nightmares that he may be, waking up to, or the sleepless nights that he's having about going to the outpost. But he was still managed enough courage to go back to where all this trauma began. And I thought that was very interesting. And then when he went back and he went into the area or the bunker looking for information regarding the data pad, the encryption, he saw the helmets of the fallen clones, and he picked up one helmet at a time and just neatly put them, stacked them together. So, he's going through a lot. And I was just very surprised that, they're able to, they wanted to bring him back so soon to the place where things just turned worse for him.
Well, we had to move the plot along some way.
No, I mean, I'm happy with it, but it was just, again, trying to think of, if I was Crosshair and I'm going through, going back to the place where I really don't want to be, because my life pretty much ended, planet. But, if you think about it, I mean, Crosshair is not really thinking about himself. He's thinking about trying to figure out how they're going to save other clones. So I think that's a big leap for Crosshair. He's not being selfish at all. Selfish could have been, I'm not going, you go. I don't want to go back there, but he did.
He continues to show a willingness to change. And I love that it happens on an ice planet where the water is frozen and still, which, water is such a great symbol of rebirth and transition and change anyway, but it's all frozen here. And Crosshair does it in a very understated way. And he's closed off, but I think he's also uncertain for maybe the first time in his life. I don't know if they ever cared about everybody's acceptance, or he would have admitted it. But now I think he's pretty desperate because he found a connection with Mayday and the other clones that are deceased, and he wants to make a change. So in a very understated way, where he doesn't draw attention to his story, he's not looking for sympathy, but he's also not shunning it either. He just organizes things, tries to get order out of a very chaotic thing that had no order to it at all. And then you juxtapose that with this sensor that's keeping that ice worm at bay, which is a great sequence. We made the crack earlier about Wrecker saying, why is there always a giant monster or a huge monster, which is so fun. I want to rewind really quickly. Hunter, the way that everybody reconciles, I think is great. Crosshair says to Echo, what, no hug for me? And he says, well, it all depends on what kind of intel you have. And they laugh. And that was good. That was good. For Wrecker, he very sweetly says, I didn't seem right, throw it away. And he kind of playfully shoves the armor. And Crosshair is touched by it. He puts it on. It still fits him. They're good. Hunter and Crosshair take a lot longer time. And that's the best part about this, because I feel like it was an authentic way for two, very stubborn, staunch staunch masculine clones to find a way to make peace with one another. And I love that they embrace their emotions, but not being emotional. And I think there's a lot of quiet inner strength in that. They, at first he says, I've done things. I mentioned that before. I killed an Imperial officer, so I betrayed the Empire. But that was after they betrayed me. And he doesn't explain it. And then the worm shows up, and it obviously throws things for a massive loop for a long time. And then at the end, Hunter forgives Crosshair, and I think Crosshair forgives himself. I don't know that he really had to forgive Hunter, but I think the acceptance from Hunter is more than enough to make them feel like they're in a good place. And at the end, it kind of pans away from the ice, like everything is kind of returning back to status quo, and nothing melts on the planet, but I think the tension between them is thawed, and it's really lovely. So, let's see. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? I think the important thing is the two of them and their conversations with one another and how they finally make peace authentically. Because I feel like we're good here. I think it would be a little disingenuous for there to still be tension with them, because then there wouldn't be any growth. These characters are actually growing and changing, and it's nice to see.
I'm just so upset that his armor's not faded to match the rest of the Bad Batch. So unless they get like new armor so they can all match up and Hasbro can sell new toys that I will absolutely buy, I'm going to be very sad.
I was thinking of that too. I want him to have like a newer look, like the Batch does from season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about the Vulture?
Let's do it.
Yes. All right. So I'm a little concerned every time I see this Vulture, and we saw it in the Outpost episode in season 2.
Yes.
And when Mayday described the Vulture as a creature that is a survivor, solitary creature, that describes Crosshair to a T. But we know vultures can be very dangerous animals.
They also eat carcasses?
Yeah. So although I can see Crosshair's changing, just a little, but I don't know if he's going to change completely. So I wanted to know from everyone else here, like, what do you think? Do you think Crosshair can completely change and stay with the Batch throughout the rest of the season? Or do you see him maybe falling back, and what I'm thinking is that he may fall back and return to the Empire because he needs to survive, right? And the only way that Crosshair knows how to survive is to be a good soldier. And I think he was getting up until the point where, he realized that maybe that Imperial officer didn't care about clones. He was fine with working for the Empire because he was doing exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a good soldier, and good soldiers follow orders. I think he's going to resort to that because that's all he knows, and that's what he does well. So what do you think? Do you think he could go back to the Empire and maybe, betray the Bad Batch again, or will you think he'll stay with the Batch throughout the season?
Mace, what do you think?
I think he will stay with the Bad Batch because I know he thought the Empire was right, but then once he saw how everyone treated the clones, he thought, this is not how I want to be treated. I'm going to go with the Batch and show them how you should be treated.
That's fair. Keith, what do you think?
I think Crosshair's going to stay with the Batch too, because there's really no point in doing all this character development only to have him regress, especially because of the fact that this is the final season. And even if this wasn't the final season, I would not be interested in watching the same build-up happen again to get the desired results.
If Crosshair goes back to the way he was, I will get the same haircut as Kerwin. Because there's just no chance. There's no chance. By the way, I would never look as handsome as Kerwin with a shaved head, by the way. That just wouldn't happen.
Nice try, Dan.
Hey, facts are stubborn things, my friend. Facts are stubborn things. What Crosshair says is, I thought I was being a good soldier. And he's quiet for a while. He doesn't try to defend it. And Hunter says, nobody really understood what was happening back then. And it's very much like a kind of a forgiveness, isn't it? I think what happened to him when he tried to save Omega countless times, they murdered his friends that he felt a real connection to, in the outpost. And he's fought so hard and been treated so poorly by the Empire. He's seen what they do to his kind. He loves his kind. And he's opening up himself up to that. So I think if that happens, then I think everything that has happened in this season and the episodes after the Outpost meant nothing. And I think Crosshair is not shallow. I think he's actually much more profound and dynamic than I would have initially expected. And we've had so much evidence of that I think it would be terrible storytelling if they do that to him. Now, these Jennifer Corbett and Brad Rowan and the team are incredibly talented. So if anybody can make that happen, they can. But if there's any kind of a franchise where we know that redemption is a massive, massive part of the building blocks of the story, it's Star Wars. So my hope is that he will go in the pantheon of great redemption stories in Star Wars.
That don't end in death.
That don't end in death. And it might. There's no greater love than to lay oneself's life down for their friends and their family. So maybe, that's what Tech did. Will we lose more than one member of the Bad Batch? I hope not.
Yeah, but
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
That's kind of a tired plot point in Star Wars, sacrificing the dying, just like Anakin and Kylo Ren and Tech did.
Well, that's fair, and it may not be for everybody. But I think, I don't know. I think it's pretty refreshing because not everybody has life or death redemptions, but we do have a lot of things where we make mistakes and we need to learn and grow from them. And I think that's a great, great metaphor for inspiration. What do you think, Mason?
Totally agree.
Whoa. All right. Your allowance has just been raised. Congratulations.
Can you PayPal me some of that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, half. Ooh. Did you two work this out before? I feel like something's a little shady going on here.
All right, well, allowance.
It's going to be half. No. So let's wrap this up. Let's give our letter grades and any last minute thoughts you want to say as we close out the show. Mason, what is your letter grade and final thoughts on the return?
My letter grade is an A because this was an amazing episode. Just like I said, my word was trust. This was getting Crosshair back within the Bad Batch and just a solid A.
Excellent. Kerwin, what about you?
I'm going to go with a B+, and a B+ is not a bad grade.
No.
I think we're going in a great direction. This episode was, although from the surface you might think nothing is happening because they're just on this planet, they're trying to get this data pad encrypted, and then there's this monster that comes out, and then you think you've seen it before. But to me, the Bad Batch is more about character development and character study. And this was a great episode where you actually see, where they've come from, where they are now and how they're trying to move forward. So I think this was a very, very good episode, but a solid B+.
Excellent. Keith, what about you?
E.
E for everyone.
E for excellent.
E for excellent.
Or just an A, actually.
A, all right, nice.
I think this episode did a really good job of putting in place the plot line where Hunter and Crosshair become, if not friends, co-workers at the best, or allies, where they're at a point where they can work together. So I think that was really nice that it didn't feel shoehorned or rushed. They made it feel natural.
Well said, my friend. I think the organic storytelling that they portray here, these are all really nice character pieces. The nice thing about a series is you have time to kind of play that out and make that come to full volition where it feels authentic. And I think they do that a nice job. I would give this one an A as well. I feel like I've been giving them all an A+, and I have no problem doing that. I think that's okay. I say this is one of the more important ones because it gives us that closure and opens up a new chapter with Hunter and Crosshair, because if they were always going to be at each other's throats, I think that would become tired. But they moved on, and we're only on season 5 of 15, so we've got 10 more episodes left. to see how that growth and maturity, not only as coworkers, but as brothers, to see how that plays out, because I think there's real love there. And I think real love and real family can sometimes be challenging. And sometimes having to love in the person where they're at, even when you don't like where they're at. And I think we're seeing that. And that combined with Crosshair being so willing to look in the mirror and own his mistakes and authentically feel sad about them and want to be better is really great. And I said this last week, if you would have asked me, hey, do you think Crosshair will ever be one of your favorite members of the Bad Batch? I would have said no chance. But now it's starting to happen, guys. It's starting to happen.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of Crosshair over the seasons. In my opinion, the best episodes of any Bad Batch feature Crosshair in the episode, and I think that's intentional.
I agree,
because he's had more character development than all of them. And you're right, he is on a redemption path. So we'll see how this goes. But yeah,
it's going to be fun.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
I knew this would be fun with the two of you. I didn't know it was going to be one of my favorite shows. I had a great time. Mason, I think I can speak for you as well. Kerwin and Keith, Father.Son.Galaxy is one of the best Star Wars podcasts out there. There are a lot of ways to enjoy the hard work the two of you are putting out. Please let us know where they can find you and what you've got going on with Father.Son.Galaxy.
Well, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Father.Son.Galaxy. We have a website, FatherSonGalaxy.com. Our email address is KEYarde@FatherSonGalaxy.com. You can find us on any streaming platform. We're on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, any one of them. We're out there. We can't be hard to find. So check us out. We also have a Patreon page. We have a Patreon page. We also have a YouTube channel.
Please.
Yes.
Please donate to our Patreon. I need to buy those DLCs.
Okay. Yes, he's asking.
And
for
I
DLCs.
also need to buy bread.
Right. I don't know where this bread thing is coming from.
Because Crosshair is like butter. Is that why?
Yeah, there you go. Bread and butter. Right.
Sure. I was just gonna grab a baguette and let it sit out for 2 days, because then you can use it as a target weapon. You can hit a dartboard with a stale baguette.
Okay.
I think AZ3 would be a lot happier than firing at the baguette instead of at AZ3. When is your live show? When do you stream so we can tune in?
Wednesdays.
Yes, we do stream on Wednesdays. As a matter of fact, we're actually not going to be live streaming this Wednesday because we actually have another obligation.
We do?
Yes, we do. You keep saying that like you don't know what I'm talking about. But we're trying to figure out when we're going to have, I believe 6 and 7 is the next double feature, or a two-part episode is coming out. So stay tuned. We'll let you know when we'll be able to review those 2 episodes.
Well, thank you again both so much for coming on Coffee with Kenobi. It was a pleasure to share the microphone with you all.
Thank you so much, Dan. You are well known in the Star Wars community. So, every time I talk about Star Wars and, who are the top podcasters in Star Wars, your name always comes up. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure being on your show.
You're very, very kind. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah. And good to meet you too, Mason.
Thank you so much. Good to meet you too.
All the best
to you.
Good to
meet you both.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.